So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and actually, it turns out I lied in the last video because I am going to be doing another preview from 0.97, and I decided to record it immediately afterwards because I did actually receive it just after I finished recording the last one. And the reason I want to do this is because it is a 4v4, so it is a rather large scale battle. We'll be seeing a couple other factions as well, including the newly added Numenor, and quite a few changes from some factions we didn't see last time in the previous patch preview that I put out. And also because I have felt bad over the past couple of months, really, in the fact that I have been given 0.97 stuff previously, and I just haven't been able to do it. First of all, because I wasn't able to do so because the university stuff was really in full swing. And ever since I finished university, the new versions of each sort of build of the patch have been going by pretty quickly, and every time I've gotten around to doing one, the build I was on was outdated. So I am going to do another one here, and it does make a good deal of sense because obviously there's a lot of stuff to talk about. I won't be going into too much detail on a lot of the changes mechanically to each of the factions, because I will be saving that until release, so that I can put them into the sort of new faction showcase videos that I'm going to be doing. Makes more sense to talk about them there because I could spend quite a lot of time and I could ramble really about each faction which is on the field today, whereas it is really better to just sort of go cursory glance over some of the new stuff, some of the changes, and then get into a battle to see how the 0.97 mechanics are different from 0.96. And the player who sent me this battle replay was Rules1, and he is going to be playing as one of the factions we saw in the previous preview as well, and that is going to be Rhudaur. Rhudaur are, honestly, in terms of mechanics, probably one of my favourite factions to play as. They do have some pretty clearly defined weaknesses, but what they are strong at, they are very, very good at. They have a lot of close range punch, a lot of damage, obviously in terms of their axe throws, their javelins, but also in melee. But obviously they do lack a little bit in terms of their overall quality. Generally speaking, Rhudaur do tend to bring larger armies of sort of more numerous and more of a quantity-focused approach a lot of the time. They do have some high-quality units, of course, but they don't tend to rely on them quite as much as, for example, the elves or some of the Western Kingdoms of men do. Also, though, they tend to have lower armour, lower morale, that sort of thing. However, we have some Trollshaw axe throwers over here, so as I said, axe throwers have changed fairly substantially since 0.96.1. They are now different from javelins, because in the past they really have just been the same thing, only with a different shaped projectile. Now though, the axe throwers have higher base damage but are not armor piercing, so they will be absolutely lethal to lightly armored troops or unshielded troops. However, if they are heavily armored and heavily shielded from the front, the axe throwers will behave a little bit more like archers in the sense that they won't do an awful lot of damage at all. So you need to be a little bit more careful with your axe throws. You need to pick and choose your targets a little bit more wisely, whereas javelins will be able to punch right on through that armour. On the front, we have several units of Dunland spears, so this is what I was talking about with Rhudaur. Generally speaking, they will be bringing quite a lot of their lower tier units to pad their army out in terms of numbers. The Dunland spears are very, very cheap, but of course they do lack quite a lot in melee. Now, as spears, of course, they will be decent against cavalry, even more so in 0.97. However, in terms of going up against other infantry, they will really, really struggle if they aren't backed up properly. So, again, when it comes to the evil men, you really do need to sort of organise your army pretty clearly. Because if you send in the Dunland spearmen on their own, they're just going to get ripped to pieces. But if you support them, the numbers that they add to a melee fight with other infantry can actually prove to be pretty decisive. Just in behind them, we have another layer of spears in the Rhudaur clansmen. They are much better all around. They have just better stats in melee. They have a much better shield value as well. They can have their armour upgraded, although that is not the case here. And overall they are a little bit more damaging in melee, but they are still subject to that spear malice, as all medieval 2 spearmen are. So 3 units of Rhudaur clansmen in behind the Dunland spears. We then, even more numbers to the Rhudaur line, we have the Rhudaur swordsmen, which are essentially the basic swordsmen that Rhudaur have. Nothing too special about them. Much like the Rhudaur clansmen in front, they make up the core units of what Rhudaur's infantry force is all about. Their numbers, again, is the main selling point for the Rhudaur swordsmen. Their stats are honestly not terrible, they will do a decent job for you in melee, provided that, again, you manage to support them. Those numbers really can come in quite handy, and of course they don't have the spear malice like the 2 units that are standing in front of them. But don't expect them to do too well against units of significantly higher quality than them, or if you send them off into an engagement where they themselves are outnumbered. Rhudaur certainly do rely in melee, outside of their really elite units, on having a bit of a numbers advantage. And then we have one of the most important units that Rhudaur can bring, the Attenmore's Troll Hunters, because again, they're spears in melee, which going to be an important aspect of them in 0.97 in particular, but also their javelins, which of course Rhudaur are very, very focused around their hand-thrown projectiles, axe throwers, and javelins both. And also, they have a decent shield and are also heavily armoured. You know, they're one of those few units in the Rhudaur roster which actually do have some pretty nice armour. So, Enedwaith's Troll Hunters are a unit which 9 times out of 10 you're going to see in the Rhudaur army just because they're a very good all-around tool, zoning out cavalry, doing a lot of damage to enemy infantry, as well as just being strong in a few areas where the rest of the Rhudaur infantry line is not. And then we have the Witch Realm Enslavers, which of course we saw in the last battle as well. Multiple HP, bodyguard tier, shock infantry. Very, very potent against enemy armoured units, very, very damaging. But of course, when it comes to multiple HP shock troops, you can't send them in all on their lonesome. Again, it's very much a case of you need to support them. You know, there's no unit in the game which you can send forward all on their own, and they will just solo the enemy army. So the Witch Realm Enslavers, if they, however, advance with the rest of the army, with a lot of these Rhudaur clans and with a lot of the Rhudaur swordsmen, that's a potent combination because you have a lot of numbers, but also in and amongst it you have the quality and the damage of the Enslavers and the Enedwaith's Troll Hunters, very much the Rhudaur mindset there. And then you have the Rhudaur Cavalry Force. Once again, we mentioned this in the last preview as well. Coldfell Maidens are a very useful unit to have because they're Javelin Cavalry and Spear Cavalry, which makes them very, very good at securing a cavalry advantage for Rhudaur. You know, you can send them in to a cav-to-cav engagement and the Coldfell Maidens will really help you out. Now, it is worth saying that if they do get engaged in melee by a unit of really good melee cavalry or spear cavalry, they will start to struggle pretty quickly and their morale is questionable in those situations. However, if you use them again and support them properly, they can be a very difficult thing for an enemy cavalry force to deal with, and if you can support them with the Franadine Nobles in particular, the Rhudaur Knights, in melee they pull out those maces, which give them that AP, which is something which really sets them apart from the other knights, especially the other human knights. They aren't as tanky as a lot of the other human knights, but even so, they're still multiple HP, they're still difficult to take down. It's not as if the Franadine Nobles are fragile by any means, it's just that when you look at their neighbours in the Knights of Numenor, for example, they do trade in a little bit of survivability and armour for a little bit more potency in melee against certain armoured targets. And there's more Coldfell Maidens, so that's actually only one army, so I think I should probably speed up, because otherwise we'll be here all day. Once again, we have Harad, so we have the Haradrim Spearmen here on the front, and we can see again the new unit models. The new unit models, one of the things that I'm also looking forward to about 0.97, a lot of the new unit models look really, really cool. Haradrim Spearmen have been the same ever since Vanilla's Third Age, and I think this look suits them a little bit more, because it looked like they were just wearing sort of robes that you would wear around the house, whereas this looks a little bit more like travel gear. It doesn't look like sort of substantial armour by any means, but then the Haradrim Spearmen are not meant to have substantial armour. Just in behind them, we still have the Haradrim Archers as well, so this is still going to be quite a common tactic you see Harad use, I think, because they need to save money to bring their monstrous units like the Mumakil and the War Beasts, and the best way to save money is to sort of load on the basic Haradrim units to pad out your numbers, which of course is important for the Evil Men. Southron Warband have also been given a bit of a makeover. They've been given sort of a darker colour scheme and sort of have their look touched up a little bit, which I, again, very much approve of. They look very nice indeed. And the Southron Warband will be backing up the Haradrim Spearmen and Archers on the front line. Southron Pikemen, of course, using the same unit model, only with the long spears or pikes. And over here we have the Trollmen of Harad, again, very much the same sort of units they were in the last patch. They technically are shock infantry with a shield. Good charge, armour piercing in melee, multiple HP, but not very good armour, and if you can get round to behind them where their shield value won't come into effect, archers are most definitely the way that you want to be dealing with them if you can help it. Dismounted Serpent Guard again, so they've got the Black Serpent unit model again. Actually, you can see the difference here. The Black Serpent unit model that is for the cavalry unit is here, whereas this is the upgraded variant of the standard Serpent Guard, so nice little comparison there. And the Dismounted Serpent Guard are good line infantry, honestly. They are very, very solid, you know, up to the same sort of level as the Uruk-hai infantry still. They don't have as higher armour or shield value, so a little bit more fragile than perhaps the Uruk-hai infantry are, around the same sort of price point. But the Dismounted Serpent Guard can do a decent amount of damage in melee, so again, Harad, much like Rhudaur next to them, javelins, you know, they're focused around, maybe their cavalry is a little bit lighter than other forces, outside of their monstrous units of course, but they're very much focused around dealing a lot of damage very quickly. Mahout Beast Hunters, of course, you know, again, basic javelins, the Mumakil here, we know what the Mumakil are all about. Mechanically, they will not really change because they're just a tour de force on the field, which is very hard to stop. Demons of the Desert, of course, very, very potent javelins. Mahout Beast Hunters, and over here we have the Black Serpent, which I really like the Black Serpent unit model. Again, I like the fact that Harad have got a bit of a darker colour scheme now. I think it suits them a little bit more. And the Black Serpents in particular, you know, obviously it very much suits their name now. And then just to the left of them, we have Imladris, played by Inaris. It's worth saying that Engsvitz is playing as Harad. So Imladris is still going to be a very popular faction, I would imagine. They actually have brought a decent archer force, so they've got some Enedwaith archers. So you can see that one of the old names coming back there. We have the Numenor Warriors with their new unit model, which I believe was done by Dreezy. I think Dreezy has been working fairly hard, actually, on the new Imladris unit models that you'll be seeing in 0.97. So obviously the Numenor Warriors are still very much a good choice for taking out units at range, but also a little bit more potency in melee with those hand axes they pull out. And also some archers of Rivendell, so usually you'll actually see Imladris go for more of a melee focus than this. 3 archers is actually quite a lot for Imladris to bring because their infantry is usually so good that people tend to load up on that. Enedwaith spearmen out here on the flank, we can see that they are still here. There was talk at one point of these guys being removed, but I'm glad to see that they're still here because the Imladris sentries are a very useful unit for Imladris to have, and I feel as though if Imladris did not have this, it would be a no-brainer to just bring as many cheap pikes as you can muster against Imladris every single time. Whereas with these, the Imladris sentries will eat cheap pikemen for breakfast, so good to see that they're still here. The Gwythi Arthand, of course, still very much the same thing from the last patch. Very tanky spearmen, won't do a lot of damage very quickly, honestly, but they will just sit in melee for as long as you want them to. Enedwaith spearmen back here, we have some Imladris Guardians, obviously very good heavy infantry unit, and then heavy infantry units. And then the cavalry, Enedwaith cavalry, of course, extremely powerful lancers, and as if that wasn't enough, what I believe to be still the strongest unit of knights in 0.97 test build as it stands, the Gwythi Rhudaur. So obviously Elven Knights, very, very strong indeed. And then the final force on this side, it was almost a complete force of evil men, because Khan, played by Lord Finrod Felagund, but Imladris has rather puzzlingly decided to join the evil men today. So we have some Variag bowmen on the front line, as well as some nomadic raiders. So as far as foot archers go, Khan very much subscribed to the pack on a bit of armour, some shields, perhaps pretty similar in many ways to Umbar. The Variag bowmen do bear a lot of similarities to the Balchoth archers. So yeah, they very much about outlasting the enemy in a skirmish fight, and that actually goes for their horse archers as well, because they can field so many horse archers that it can honestly be really, really difficult to bring them down. Like Khan, most factions will want to keep their horse archers away from the enemy foot archers, but Khan can field so many that they won't actually mind losing a few. We have a new unit for Khan as well in the Brotherhood of the Spear. So the Brotherhood units have been expanded a little bit. There are a couple new Brotherhood units to give Khan a few more high tier options that they can bring, and one of them is the Brotherhood of the Spear, so obviously a big shield, a massive shield in fact, and obviously a spear as well. And considering the buffs to spearmen, this is a very nice new addition for Khan to have on their roster. We also have the incredibly swift Nurad Windblade, so technically speaking they are, I don't really know what to call them other than melee knights. They are a unit of bodyguard tier melee cavalry alongside the likes of Witchrealm Inquisitors and the Haven Knights, but they are very different in how they're intended to be used because they are quite fragile to archers. They do have multiple HP which will keep them alive for a little while, but no shields and lighter armour than both of the units I mentioned previously does mean that you want to use them a little bit more carefully, but they are incredibly fast. No unit of cavalry, once they see the Nurad Windblades coming for them, is really going to be able to escape, which is a very useful thing to have, because one thing that the Haven Knights and the Witchrealm Inquisitors may struggle with, all that heavy armour weighing them down, they are not good. They're not as swift as the Windblades, certainly. Then we have a force of Nurad footmen, still the same solid core that Khan can field as they always have been. Good shields, decent armour, but of course the armour piercing is what really sets them apart. Can be a bit of a problem if you're up against a force which isn't heavily armoured, but if you are, very, very efficient indeed. Same can be said for the Nurad halberd, still a very basic halberdier of course. Back here we've got some more cavalry, and indeed it is the Variag Windriders, melee cavalry again. A lot of Khan is made up of melee cavalry and horse archers. They do have a couple units of lancers, but for the most part they are few and far between. Sets them apart from Rohan a bit anyway. Brotherhood of the Axe, again, still the same sort of thing as they were in the last patch. Nurad Storm Guard as well, again, still very much the same sort of thing, multiple HP halberdiers. Over here, that's actually Riders of the Bruinen, so that's actually an Imladris unit, which is back over here. Potentially going to be riding with the Riders of Khand today. We've got some nomadic axemen, and more nomadic axemen actually, so some cheap axes, which the evil men are very much known for. Variag horse archers, so this is again another example of a unit which is maybe slightly tankier for Khand, where it wouldn't be for other factions at range, because decent armour, but also those little bucklers will really help them. So perhaps you could look at them as being the equivalent of the Riders of the Fold. for Rohan. And then over here, just at the back, we have some nomadic scouts. Khand actually do have a chariot unit as well now, which has been added, which Finrod has elected not to bring in this fight, which is another unit, the Brotherhood of the Wain. But now we'll go through the red team. I'll try and speed things up a little bit, because I know that I'm rambling a little bit here, but I can't help it with all of this new stuff. We have Blindness, who is playing as Numenor, and I have to say, I think Numenor, with the new updated unit models they've been given, I think Numenor might be my favourite looking faction in the game. Like, they are absolutely stunning. We can see that they have the Romena marksmen here at the front, which are, again, very strong in melee, which is something which Numenor are going to have to do because their roster is quite limited in terms of scope. You know, they have fewer units, but those units will be able to do more. Perhaps in a similar vein that you could compare them to Linden in that respect. But the thing about the Romena marksmen, they have very limited ammunition, but they are armor-piercing archers. Now, armor-piercing archers, getting flashbacks to the old days where the Eldarenway archers, you could field 3 of them, and they were armor-piercing, and they had all of the bells and whistles that Elven archers usually have, extra sort of base damage and insane accuracy. That is not what the Romena marksmen are, because they have very limited ammunition. You have to target the right things with them. They can still be just as devastating as the Eldarenway archers from the old days, but it's in far shorter time frame. You definitely need to pick and choose your targets, because, you know, as Numenor, you're probably going to have smaller armies. You're going to have sort of less resources on the field than a lot of other factions, other than perhaps the elves. So you definitely need to be careful with the ammunition. You can't afford to waste it on militia, for example. You'll rip through that militia, but it's ammunition that's far too valuable to use on that sort of unit. Then we have the line infantry for Numenor, the Romena legionaries. So you know what Numenor are going to be all about. Very much quality heavy. You know, it's going to take a lot to sort of get through a Numenorian infantry line. You know, you're either going to need a huge numbers advantage, or you're going to need to go heavy into your quality. And then over on the side you have the spear variant, the Romena spear guards, of course. Just in behind them we have the Seafarers of Nindamos, which have become the only javelin unit that Numenor have. They're also a very important part of Numenor, because they also have a two-handed axe which they use as a backup weapon. So this is Numenor's primary armor-piercing option. You know, so if you're up, you know, most of Numenor's roster does lack a little bit in AP, except for this unit. This unit, it's all bound up in here. Kind of how the Dunedain Trollslayers act for Arthedain. That's kind of the role that the Seafarers of Nindamos fill for Numenor, but they are cheaper than the Trollslayers, and also, you know, more men in the unit. Just in behind them, we have the Naruna Ari Royal Guard, a unit they share with Umbar, of course, and this is them in their new form. They're no longer a bodyguard tier unit. They have 103 men in the unit. They're not multiple HP anymore, but they are still spear-archer hybrids, and still a very strong unit. They may not have multiple HP anymore, but they're actually a little bit more user-friendly now, I think, because you can afford to use them. And archers with limited men in the unit, you know, generally speaking, they were used very sparingly in the last faction. I imagine that's still going to be the case in 0.97. The Naruna Ari Royal Guard now will be able to be used a little bit more actively. The Royal Legion of Armenelos with their golden armour, another stunning looking unit for Numenor. Possibly the new strongest sword and shield unit in the game, we shall see. They're going to be on the field today. Naruna Ari Sentinels, of course, a strong pikemen that they have available. We have the Elder Londe Nobles, which are another unit which look absolutely just brilliant, I have to say. I believe they're melee knights now. I think they weren't quite as up to that level, because I think they used to have the Alcarondas Faithful as well, Numenor. But the Alcarondas Faithful, I think, have been made into an Umbar exclusive unit, which means the Elder Londe Nobles have also been sort of moved up in the packing order to be of a similar tier, which is good to see, and I'm glad, because this is a fantastic looking unit. And as if that wasn't enough, we have the Heralds of Irendil, or Irendil? I don't know, I'll have to look up how to pronounce that properly, but again, look at these units. So yeah, this is again a bodyguard tier heavy swordsman, and this is going to be the sort of unit which can contend with the Noldorin Blade Masters and the Temple Executioners for the best heavy swordsman in the game. We'll go through this army a little bit more quickly, because it's Numenor again, played by Solomon. He too has got Elder Londe Nobles, he's got Belagai footmen. So Numenor do have the Belagai units, which is the closest they come to having a cheap and affordable front line. So you can call on the Belagai footmen and archers if you need to save a little bit of money. But of course it's a unit they share with Umbar. Seeing the Umbar's connection to Numenor there. Romena Legionaries once again. More Seafarers of Nindamos, which honestly Seafarers of Nindamos will probably be in every Numenor comp just because of the armour piercing and the fact that javelins can just be so useful in any situation. Belagai archers here, he's actually got a ballista out in front, which will force Imladris into maybe rethinking their plan, although I think that ballista crew is in range of the archers, which is not great for them. And then more Seafarers of Nindamos, and more Belagai footmen. Then, just to their left, we can see that King of the North, or DI, is going to be playing as Dorwinion today. So we saw Dorwinion in the last preview, so I'm going to probably go through them a little bit more quickly, because I've already gone through them again, the human-elven hybrid faction that they are. Elvelyn Vinegard, the sort of heavily armoured, very durable human units that make up the core of Dorwinion, the cohort and the Vinegard being the spears and the infantry together. Morroquendi bows with their poison arrows. You can see in the middle of their army they actually have the Nandarin Glade Riders, which we didn't see last time. They have the full charge bonus of 20. They have a just as devastating a charge as a unit of Knights would, but they are very, very fragile. They could actually be, the unit I would sort of compare them most closely to would probably be the Brotherhood of the Lance from 0.96.1. If you remember how devastating they were on a charge, but how fragile they were, that's kind of what the Nandarin Glade Riders are. And you can have two as Dorwinion, which is always very nice. You can see the Morroquendi Pikes in there with their waved glaives. The Elvelyn Marksmen, again, forming up layers. Over here we have the Nandarin Glade Lords, obviously the Knights for Dorwinion. Very, very potent. And then finally, I believe we have Umbar. We do indeed, played by Mech Thorn. So once again, we have the Balagai units. Obviously, they have their new unit models as well, it's worth saying. They've got new helmets. They've been just touched up a little bit. Those little touches are what is really going to set 0.97 apart, I think. There's a lot of new stuff to behold. We have the Keldor Marksman, previously, of course, the Abrazanim Nadubawi, which, honestly, I never had an issue with pronouncing the Abrazanim name, so I wouldn't have minded if they stayed, but the Keldor Marksman, the new name, and obviously, again, a very tanky archer. Not that Rhudaur are going to need any invitation to come forward and charge Umbar, to be honest with you. Narina Aru Royal Guard, so again, very similar to the, or exactly the same, really, except for the coloration as the Numenor variant, 104 men in the unit. I think, actually, this is the General's unit, because, yes, indeed it is. So you can see that Castamir himself is in that unit still. We've got some Balagai pikemen as well, so, Balagai halberds are gone. They've been replaced by Balagai pikemen, which I think, considering the Corsairs have largely been dropped from Umbar's roster, this is a good thing for Umbar, because they definitely need to retain a good, solid, and fairly cheap pike unit in their roster, more than they needed the halberds, I think. The Balagai halberds were seldom seen, to be honest, in point. Well, you saw them a fair amount, but I feel as though pikes are going to be more useful for Umbar, considering what they're all about. Corsair Blackguards, still the same unit they always were. We have the Alcarondas Legion, which, they're no longer a part of Numenor at all. So they remain an Umbar exclusive unit, which I'm actually glad of, because I feel as though, considering the sort of slight Gondorian look to them, I feel as though it makes a little bit more sense for them to be an Umbar exclusive, as are the Alcarondas Faithful, which are, of course, again, melee knights, an incredibly devastating unit of melee knights at there. And then finally, we have a unit of Numenorean Lancers. So, again, a bit of an elongated look at the army compositions there. I will be sort of gesturing very heavily, I think, towards the description if this doesn't interest anyone, but considering this is a lot of new stuff to talk about, I feel as though it was warranted. And it is only a 10k battle, so it is going to be a brutal, fast and furious fight, I'm imagining. And with that in mind, let us begin. And one thing that I can certainly count upon here is the fact that Rhudaur are going to be very aggressive, because they have no archers in their roster. Umbar are immediately going to open up on them. Umbar's archers are not necessarily based too heavily around dealing damage quickly, but they don't need to be when they have no competition at range. But they're also going after just the basic units so far. They may as well go after the Dunland Spearmen because of the really heavy shield value on the Rhudaur clansmen as the men of Rhudaur charge savagely towards the Umbar lines, and this is going to be where the first engagements happen. We'll see what Mech Thorn does to counter this extreme Rhudaur aggression. We'll see if he has the infantry to hold. He's got a lot of Balagai footmen, he's got some pikes, he's got some crossbows that were hidden, as well as some Alcarondas Legion, so we shall see. The Alcarondas Faithful are going to charge right into the front here of the advancing Rhudaur army. The problem that they will have, though, is that all of these are spearmen, so the Alcarondas Faithful are one of the tankiest units of cavalry in the game. But they're going to need to be careful about engaging spears for any length of time. I don't think they lost... Well, they did lose a couple that got caught there. You can see that Rhudaur immediately charging in here. I think we will actually turn it down to half speed, because this is going to be a very quick battle, I would imagine. But this is what Rhudaur are going to be capable of doing. A lot of numbers in their roster that they can bring. And rushing like this is going to be a bit of a go-to, I think, for Rhudaur. I mean, Rhudaur can be played in many different ways, but I feel as though in this sort of situation, you can rush in with a lot of cheap infantry, engage the enemy lines, and then you can get your units of javelins and axe throwers into position. It's going to be pretty lethal, but this is a very nice position Sneaky, sneaky by Mech Thorn, as the Castamir's Rangers were hidden up here on the hill, and they have an absolutely perfect shot right down the line. This is honestly something which the Rhudaur cavalry is going to need to get involved with very quickly, but the question is whether this very thin Umbar front line is going to be able to hold up for long against the savage Rhudaur assault, long enough for those Castamir's Rangers to do the damage that they honestly need to, if Umbar are going to survive that assault. Meanwhile, we have Harad, who are getting their Mumakil in and amongst a unit of crossbow corsairs which were also on the side. The Nanda and Glade Lords are trying to stop them, but trying to slow down the Mumakil is most certainly easier said than done. You can also see that it was technically Dorwinion that actually advanced a little bit further forwards here, so they have actually taken the bull by the horns. They're going to take Harad head on. The Elvelyn units and the Morroquendi pikes put together should be more than enough to deal with the basic Southrons and Haradrim units that Enedwaith has on his front line. It's definitely going to come down to units like the Trollmen and the Javelins to try and whittle down this Dorwinion front line, which Trollmen and Javelin units, the Mahud Javelins, are definitely going to be exactly the sort of thing that you're going to want to deal with the very heavily armoured Elvelyn cohort. Well, over here you can see that the Glade Riders is a very fragile unit of cavalry, all things considered. You can see that already they're starting to bleed their manpower a little bit, but they're very lethal on the charge, although they're already taking a few pot shots from the Imladris army. You can see that over here, much slower to get going. And you can see that already this ballista has taken a huge amount of damage here from Numenor because they're in range of the Elven archers, which is not good for them. They're trying to pick away at the Elven manpower a little bit, which is good to see at the very least. And then you can see over here, trying to sort of whittle down the Numenor manpower a little bit is going to be Finral Felagund with some nomadic light cavalry. But Numenor are going to be able to absorb that ammunition relatively easily, to be honest with you. It's over here where the true action is happening, and unsurprisingly, the Rhudaur cavalry was activated very quickly when those Castamir's Rangers revealed themselves, and the Thranodine nobles with a brutal charge into the Castamir's Rangers. The Castamir's Rangers, their fighting days are very much numbered. And that's bad news for Umbar, because they needed those Rangers to continue firing into the advancing Rhudaur forces in order to sort of withstand their assault. As it is though, Coldfell Maidens are coming in to back up the position, the Trollshore Axe Throwers are getting in here as well. The Corsair Blackguards and the Alcarondas Legion are sending these Rhudaur swordsmen routing, but there's so many Javelins and Axe Throwers in close proximity, they're going to be taking a lot of damage very, very quickly, I think, the Umbar forces. Credit to Umbar though, they are hanging on in there, considering that I don't think their army was altogether prepared for a full-on infantry rush like this. And that is one thing that Umbar does have in their favour over the other Evil Men factions. They are a little bit more quality focused, and coming hand in hand with that is the fact that their morale, generally speaking, is much, much better. So they will be able to stick in the fight for far longer, but I do feel as though Rhudaur are very much in the ascendancy here. There's a dead Mumakil in and amongst those lines there. And the problem that they're going to have here is that as soon as Rhudaur are done, they're going to be able to wrap up the Dorwinion lines. So perhaps in preparation for that, Mech Thorn is actually turning some of his reserves around and is trying to help Dorwinion against Harad. So if Dorwinion can beat Harad quickly, maybe Dorwinion can then face off against Rhudaur. We shall see. Those dismounted Serpent Guards surrounded by some crossbow corsairs and some Belagar footmen, although there's a very limited force of Vine Guard over here as well. But the dismounted Serpent Guard are a really good unit, and considering how depleted these Umbar forces are, they should be just fine. You can see Umbar are in retreat at this point. Rhudaur are now also heading over here, which is bad news in particular for Dorwinion. Well, you can see over here that all of these Morroquendi Stalkers, which were hidden in the army compositions, those Horse Archers which can hide and also double as Spear Cavalry, which we saw in the last faction showcase, trying to kill the Mumakil. They're actually running amok, which is a good point actually. That's a thing that I didn't realise you could do with the Poison Arrows, because they work very much the same way Fire Arrows do. You can make the Mumakil run amok with them relatively easily. So that's something that Lothlorien and Dorwinion can do to pretty good effect actually against all units that can run amok. Interesting indeed. Meanwhile, Dismounted Serpent Guard doing very well against the Elvelyn units here. The Elvelyn Vine Guard are spears, of course, so the Dismounted Serpent Guard can count on having a bit of an advantage in melee there. How has the Dorwinion assault gone, though, would be my question. I mean, they're winning, but they're not winning anywhere near quickly enough. What are they going to do here in the side? I mean, they are sort of getting around to the side here. But the Eldorlonde nobles from Solomon are coming over to try and give them a bit of support. In turn, however, the Imladris cavalry has also come over here to try and help out Harad. So it's very much, it's not 4 1v1s this, but a good teamwork going on as all of the teammates on both sides trying to help one another. But certainly I feel as though the blue team have got a bit of an early advantage here because Umbar have been run down by Rhudaur pretty quickly. Not much of Umbar left to try and help Dorwinion guard their flank. You can see the Elvelyn cohorts are starting to rout. Where the Trollmen are, the Elvelyn units are having a lot more difficulties. And that does make a good deal of sense, of course. Rumakil's starting to die off. Dorwinion still have a few units back here as well. Morroquendi Stalkers firing away poison arrows, streaking down the field. What have we got here? Morroquendi bows, that's more poison arrows shooting into the dismounted Serpent Guard, but they should pay attention to the Rhudaur army that's marching towards them. The Rhudaur swordsmen still charging towards. Still at half speed because there's so much going on here that I really don't want to miss too much. Caldor marksmen fighting on the front line. I mean, they're decent as melee infantry, to be honest with you. Very much like the Bardian marksmen from Dale. Of course, they're no substitute for sort of dedicated quality line infantry, but still, they won't just roll over and die in melee like cheaper archers might. Meanwhile, Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters doing the business in melee. There's actually some routing clansmen here, so it does go to show that Rhudaur's morale is not great. I mean, they have won fairly substantially over here, and yet still some of their units are running for the hills. So that is something to bear in mind when you play as the Savage Men of the North. Harajam archers moving over here to try and give a little bit of backup to the Rhudaur advance. They've advanced through Umbar and now they're going to try and crash into the side of Dorwinion and what's left of the Umbar forces that they could salvage. There's a lot of javelins forming up over here as well, which is not good news for Dorwinion. Dorwinion, however, through the middle are really making up some ground. One problem that they are going to run into, though, is that these Elven Knights are over here as well. Fortunately, they do have a lot of spears on standby. There's the Eldorlonde cavalry. I mean, yeah, I would feel comfortable in saying that Dorwinion have technically won the centre, but coming over from the flank that was sort of advancing along near to where Rhudaur deployed, the Trollmen of Harad are now starting to wrap up the line. And Elvelyn cohort and Vineguard are going to be no match for Trollmen. It's pretty much the ideal unit to take them on with, to be brutally honest. Backed up by a few units of Southrons that managed to survive the Dorwinion attack in the centre. Dorwinion's formation is quite deep though. They do have quite a lot of units still waiting here at the back, but the problem is all of them are going to be tied up by the Rhudaur units sooner rather than later. The Morroquendi bows are being engaged in melee by a slew of Dunland spearmen and Rhudaur swordsmen. Of course, they are technically heavy elven archers in melee. With those glaives, they are more designed for taking on cavalry in melee than infantry, to be quite frank. But they should still be able to do a decent number on these basic Rhudaur infantrymen, provided no really high quality units come in and help. Caldor marksmen are shaken at this point. Dismounted Serpent Guard and Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters doing the business. What have we here? Blindness's Eldorlonde nobles are right in and amongst the Imladris archers here, which is good. I mean, they won't mind being under arrow fire too much. Multiple HP, really thick armour, good shields. Getting in and amongst the archers of Rivendell there, although not a particularly devastating sort of foray into enemy territory, but Imladris with their cavalry elsewhere trying to do some damage to Dorwinion, that it is a good opportunity for Numenor to make something happen here. And honestly, Khand, they don't really need to move forward. You know, it's really on Numenor at this point because the red team are behind in this fight at the moment, I would suggest. So it's really on Numenor to make something happen over here, and all Khand really need to do is hold their ground and continue to sort of poke and prod away at Blindness's army. And the Nurad units with their AP will be useful against Numenor. They will still struggle against the sheer quality that Numenor can bring to bear, but well, those Ballistae, I mean, that is a very densely packed area they're getting into. Getting a few of the Variag Horse Archers there, but as I was saying, Numenor's quality should still be enough to see them through against the Khandish infantry, but the armour piercing will still do damage, and Khand then can also do some damage with their cavalry. Meanwhile, yeah, you can see that through the middle here, there's less and less Dorwinion units. There's some Nandering Glade Lords, which are right in the middle of everything over here, as well as the Alcarondas Faithful, so that's two very strong units of cavalry that the red team have running around here in the middle. And the Alcarondas Faithful are actually going to a bit of a battle of the Titans going on here. The Alcarondas Faithful versus the Gwaithir Rhudaur. That's two very, very powerful cavalry units indeed. Nandering Blade Lords charging into the rear of the Haradrim archers, easily breaking them, of course. Still a cluster of Elvelyn units here in the centre, doing what they can. I think actually now it's safe to turn it up to 1 speed, actually, considering that the engagements are a little bit easier to follow now. Southron Warband is shaken. You can see there the Belagai footmen from Numenor coming in to help out against the Trommen of Harad. So actually, the Harad advance has been slowed down fairly substantially. That, I think, was the Numenor general. There goes the Dorwinion general, certainly. I can see that the purple of his shield hit the deck. But yeah, the Eldorlonde nobles getting caught out by the Veriag Wind Riders and the Nurad Windblade. So 2 units of Khandish melee cavalry, one being very high tier, catching up to the Numenor cavalry. And the Khandish cavalry, with how quick it is very good at doing that. You can see now that some of the Numenor infantry sort of getting a little bit closer, chasing the Khandish cavalry off. The infantry lines are slowly shifting closer to one another at this point. As soon as those javelins get into range, the Naryn Royal Guard are still firing away as well. But forward come Numenor. I think they realise that with the Imladris cavalry away, and with Khan starting to take a bit of damage, you know, they need to make something happen over here. Because while Harad's advance is stalling, and Harad's army is, you know, taking a lot of damage, I'd have to say, with all of Rhudaur's numbers that they have left, they should still be victorious over on this side, the blue team. You can see, based on the map, the fact that the blue team are starting to sort of wrap up the red team's entire formation. It bodes well for the blue team. The Numenorian Shadow Guard, meanwhile, the Numenor Rangers, getting charged down there by the Imladris cavalry. The Morroquendi bows are routing, which is not a good sign. A few of the Haradrim units still here. The Umbar forces trying to retreat, not routing, just trying to get away. The Demons of the Desert are such a lethal unit as well, which they want to steer well clear of course. And here comes the Rhudaur force, so still, Harad and Rhudaur push forwards with the support now of the Imladris cavalry as well. It's not looking good. I think there's still a few units. Yeah, I mean, Dorwinion are technically still alive, but both Dorwinion and Umbar have really felt the sting of a savage attack from Rhudaur and Harad. And seeing as Rhudaur and Harad are 2 factions with very similar philosophies when it comes to warfare, it does make a good deal of sense that when they both follow the same plan, good results are had. The ballista has turned around, although I'm not sure how much damage that will really do. See over here that some units have been held in reserve. The Seafarers of Nindamos, actually maybe not AP in melee. I thought that was a 2-handed axe they had. But with only a 1-handed axe, that means they aren't AP in melee. But still, the same thing applies. With their javelins, they're still going to be such an important part of Numenor's armour-piercing contingent. And they are here trying to stop the advance of Harad and Rhudaur, but I'm not sure whether they're going to have too much success in doing that. Forward come the Rhudaur forces through the rocks. Kaldor marksmen trying to get a few volleys off. At this point, it really is a bit of a rearguard action from Numenor, and they're going to have to hope they can deal with the Imladris and Khandish forces as quickly as possible so they can then turn around. But one does not deal quickly with an Imladris infantry force that includes Imladris sentries. You can beat it, of course you can, but destroying it quickly is very unlikely. Meanwhile, the Heralds of Erendil, right in and amongst this formation with the Romena legionaries. And Numenor are one of those factions which, honestly, you know, most of the time Imladris are going to feel very confident about their ability to just outperform enemy infantry lines. Numenor are one of those factions, honestly, which I feel as though Imladris will be a little bit more worried about. Numenor can certainly mix it with the best when it comes to their really high quality units of infantry. Meanwhile, Romena Spear Guards, I almost called them Sea Guards then. There's another unit of Heralds of Erendil, blindness his army. The Nurad Storm Guard trying to hold them back, and Nurad Storm Guard AP, multiple HP halberdiers, should be ideal in this situation. But they're getting pelted by javelins. You can see the Khandish cavalry also charging in as well to the Numenor infantry. Can they hold them back? We shall see javelins flowing in. All Khan need to do here is hold the line, because you can see that Rhudaur are sort of pushing in. If Khan can hold the line, they should be just fine. Khan are actually the ones which are wrapping around Numenor here. You can see that the Royal Legion of Armenelus are here on the flank, and they'll be able to really easily deal with Nomadic Axemen. AP or not, Nomadic Axemen are just nowhere near the level of quality that is needed to take down the Royal Legion. Naryn Iru Sentinels trying to hold on, but again, all of these Nurad units with their AP, they are going to be able to be efficient in this sort of engagement. They wouldn't necessarily win if they were all on their lonesome. They would need the support of the Brotherhood units. The Brotherhood of the Spear are there, but another unit which will find itself quite at home in this sort of situation will be the Brotherhood of the Axe, as they face off against the onrushing Ravenna Spear Guards. I think there's a little bit of desperation setting in from Numenor here. They're just trying to charge everything in and trying to make something happen, but unfortunately for them, with the advance of Rhudaur and what's left of Harad sort of wrapping up the line, there goes one of the Numenor generals. Granadine nobles pulling out those really wicked looking Morning Star maces that they have. But yeah, with the support of Harad and Rhudaur now arriving on scene, the two Numenor armies, it's not looking good for them. Both Khand and Imladris, all they needed to do was hold on for a little while, and they've managed to do that fairly comfortably. As strong as Numenor's infantry are, they're very much back to the wall here. Seafarers of Nindamos mixing it up with the High Elven cavalry. There's all of the Rhudaur forces still. Obviously a lot of their units are looking a little bit battered and bruised. Rhudaur swordsmen, they start off with over 200 men, now they're below 100. Numenor footmen doing very well actually on the front line here, but Numenor were spread quite thin when they charged forward, trying to make something happen. But ultimately the blue team were able to work in tandem very, very nicely with one another. Here are the Royal Legion, in and amongst the nomadic axemen still. Balagai footmen routing for the hills. Helvellyn marksmen running away as well. You can see that they're all running down the valley. Flee! It's the only way out. Morquendi Bow's also running away. What have we got here? Ravenna marksmen taking a really nasty charge there from the Granadine nobles. Granadine nobles, I think, it looks almost as if they've had a little bit of a unit upgrade as well. Their armour looks just a little bit different, unless I'm just seeing things. I'm watching for sort of new unit models, so it's quite possible that I'm just seeing changes where there are none. Meanwhile, here are the Heralds of Erendil, but at this point, as strong as they are, they're just here all on their lonesome. They're also, you know, the Nurad Storm Guard, a very, very strong unit as well. Here are some Brotherhood units though. Brotherhood of the Axe, fighting on the front line against the Ravenna Legionaries and winning, and that's good. You can see also that the Brotherhood of the Spear are here also. Noricino warriors helping to surround those Numenorians. So yeah, it was a desperate attack from Numenor really. I feel as though if Numenor were going to do that, they needed to do it far earlier. They only really advanced when it was clear that their allies over on the other side were struggling horribly. And by the time they did that, it was far too late, unfortunately for that. And obviously this just made it easier for the blue team to then surround them. Imladris and Khand held up very resolutely. And there they go. Admission of defeat. And a very nice victory indeed for the blue team. So again, a lot of new stuff on display here. Obviously the new unit models for Numenor. I really love the new unit models for Numenor, I have to say. Look absolutely fantastic. New units on display for factions that were existing previously as well. So we can see, oh, excuse me, some new units for Umbar, some new units for Khand. You know, the new Brotherhood of the Spear unit there. New unit models as well, obviously for like Rhudaur, Imladris, again Umbar with the Balagai units. So a lot of new stuff on display here, and a big thank you to Rules for sending this one to me. I would certainly imagine, I don't want to sort of lay down any definitive statements any longer, because I don't really know whether I will show any more 0.97 preview stuff before it comes out, because obviously we are fairly close at this point to release. But who knows? Big thank you to Rules for sending this one to me. We'll see what did the damage for him. Obviously his rush and the fact that Umbar's army wasn't really designed to withstand such a heavy assault was ultimately one of the sort of key factors in this battle, because Umbar were just, their formation fell apart far too quickly. Those Castamir's Rangers could honestly have dealt such grievous wounds to Rhudaur, but the Castamir's Rangers, Umbar didn't really have the means to protect them outside of the Alcarondas faithful, and they were off doing other things on the battlefield, so the Castamir's Rangers were charged, and from then on it was only a matter of time before Rhudaur defeated Umbar, started to move up the lines. I mean, Dorwinion was doing pretty well against Harad, honestly. It was sort of a very evenly fought contest, but as soon as Rhudaur sent all of their units over as well, it was only going to end one way, and from then on the red team's fate was sealed. As for the MVPs for Rhudaur's army, 163 units on a basic unit of Rhudaur clansmen, so it does go to show that even basic units like this can really do some heavy lifting and you don't necessarily need a super elite unit to get a lot of kills. I mean, this unit of Ettenwall's Troll Hunters only got 7, and usually the Ettenwall's Troll Hunters are such a tour de force on the field, but this time, less important. Witchrealm and Slavers, only 20. In this case, it was just the basic workhorse units like the Dunland Spearmen, the Rhudaur Clansmen, and the Rhudaur Swordsmen, which tended to get the higher kills, which is good to see. It's a good showcase of how you don't necessarily need to rely on just elite units to get the damage done for you. So yeah, big thank you to Rules 1. Good to see just another little sneak preview of 0.97 before it comes out. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.